Humanity loves its suffering. At least the vocal ones do. The only thing you value more than being a hero is being a victim. Without someone suffering, there would be no need for a hero, and so no one gets to be a hero. Thus, the more important character, the prerequisite if you will, is the victim. Hero complexes aside, you all seem to define your lives by your suffering. What's the phrase? Misery loves company? Why? That's the kind of shit we do downstairs. Nothing seems to make you feel better than seeing to it that someone else feels worse. I mean, fuck. The Germans even had a word for taking pleasure at somebody else's misfortune. Schadenfreude. Suffering is at the core of what you are as a species. Now, I'm sure you are all familiar with the progressive stack, but I'll put it up on the screen for a few seconds so you can reacquaint yourselves, but please take notes, there will be a quiz later. I don't feel like I have to belabor deconstructing the nonsense that is this concept in relation to the regressive left. However, I have found that it applies equally well to the right. In this case, the alt-right. I would like to caveat that I do not mean these remarks to denigrate the majority of the alt-right, who associate with it because they see the alt-right as the only group of people willing to stand up to the SJW bullshit that is flowing like cheap wine at a bachelorette party. These remarks are focused on two specific groups within the alt-right, and I will get into that right now. Doing some research, I looked into the origins and activities of the alt-right and came across two very good articles regarding it. I'm going to ignore the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center's descriptions, because they are biased and frankly very clumsy and unnuanced. The first good article, by Mr. Milo Yiannopoulos and Alum Bukhari, does a great job detailing the origin of the alt-right. I'm not going to go through the whole article as it is lengthy and detailed, but bring up two parts which I want to discuss. The Natural Conservatives and the 1488ers. I'm going to tackle the latter ones first. The 1488ers are white supremacists. Not to be confused with white nationalists, because the distinction is very real. I hate to have to say this, because the strife and chaos caused by racism is quite beneficial to us downstairs, but being racist is fucking retarded. We don't even segregate based on race in hell. The KKK gets punished right next to the Black Panthers. Yes, there are distinct objective differences between the various races of human. However, when it comes to cognitive ability or morality, the science is conflicted at best, and it only applies over the aggregate. As with any stereotype, you cannot say for certain that a specific individual is going to be more or less intelligent than any other individual based solely on race. To apply a stereotype to an individual is unethical. People should be treated as individuals. Well, now that that horse has been beaten beyond death, let us move on to the main point of this conversation. Namely that the Natural Conservatives, as Milo named them, have become the SJWs of the right. Before we go any further, I would like to point to a second article by Christopher Caldwell that came out roughly 9 months after Milo's. It is a pretty fair piece, in my opinion, and details how the alt-right has changed since Milo's original article. Remember that quiz about the progressive stack I mentioned earlier? Well, get out a clean sheet of paper and a number 2 pencil, kiddos. It's time for that quiz. First question. If the number 1 spot is race and the oppressed group is non-whites according to the leftists, what would be the oppressed group for the Natural Conservatives of the alt-right? Second question. If the sex category has the female as the left's oppressed group, what does the Natural Conservative consider as the oppressed group? Last question. If the LGBTAQ plus parenthesis yellow sky is the oppressed group for the left regarding sexuality, what is it for the Natural Conservative? Done? Alright, pencils down. The answers are white, male, and straight. That's right, my minions. The Natural Conservatives simply take identity politics and reverse the roles. While I would agree that white straight men are generally shat upon in Western society today, especially by the left, the idea that white people should have a special place in society is as equally absurd as the idea that trans people should have a special place or that women should have a special place. No one gets a special place. You all equally suck. That being said, the majority of a nation generally gets to set the tone. A majority Western country is going to favor Western ideals and practices, just as any majority Muslim country is going to favor Muslim ideals and practices. Any outsider has to blend in and assimilate. You don't get to move to a different country and then demand they cater to you. The United States has been, for the past centuries, a melting pot. People would immigrate in, create their little clusters, think Chinatown, Little Italy, etc., but adapt their culture to the American way of life. They may have spoken Italian in the home, but they spoke English outside, because that is what the majority of Americans spoke. In the present, America has become more of a stew than a melting pot. People are clumping and staying clumped. That shit has got to stop if you ever want to move on. Moving on. The rise of the alt-right is a natural consequence of the last decade and a half of regressive leftists doing everything in their power to shame and denigrate Western society and traditional masculinity. It is, to borrow another very apt term from Milo, the Frankenstein monster of the left. They created it through their mad social Marxism, and now it has a life of its own. They will be destroyed by it, which is just fine by me. They were getting out of hand and needed to be put down anyway. As a bonus, it is fucking hysterical to see the shitposters of the world troll the absolute fuck out of these SJWs online and in real life. I am pretty sure the only place Shia LaBeouf's He Will Not Divide Us campaign would be safe from trolling is in orbit. And even then, I have the feeling someone would bribe Elon Musk for a quick trip to spray paint #MAGA on it. The suffering of the fringe left and the suffering of the fringe right are both definitions of first world problems. You have food to eat, water to drink, and a roof over your head? Congratulations, you are better off than a whole lot of other people on this awful planet. Someone said something you felt was a microaggression, so you need a safe space? Here's a not-so-microaggression for you. Fuck you, and fuck your feelings. Someone moved in next door that has a slightly darker skin tone than you'd prefer? Ninda cachetombi, colcara, and besame mi kyo, pendejo. If you live in Western society, the suffering of your people is, 99 times out of 100, not really an issue. It's not oppression to be catcalled, it's not oppression to have immigrants legally enter the country, and it's not oppression to state there are only two genders. Please, get the fuck over yourselves, let people make their own life decisions, and just try to be happy for once. Some final thoughts. The alt-right has some very valid points to be made in terms of culture and assimilation. Namely, that vastly different cultures generally have a difficult time getting along. One can look at the riots, soaring crime rates, and general discord in Europe to see that plainly enough. However, their focus on the diversity or hegemony of society based on race drags behind their message like an anchor. They are never going to get their voices heard and their grievances promptly aired as long as the racism of the 1488ers and silly identity politics of the natural conservatives are at the forefront of their message. The majority of people have no problem getting along with those of other races, and the natural conservatives' insistence on the emphasis of white Western culture is no different than the leftist insistence on minority races and foreign cultures. The average person looks at them with apathy at best, but more likely mild contempt. I am going to close with a message to any alt-righters that may be listening. If you identify as an alt-righter, but do not harbor the racism of the 1488ers or the identity politics of the natural conservatives, get out now. Take your good ideas and leave. Leave them with the check, the alt-right name, and get the fuck out. Leave the Richard Spencers and white supremacists with their backwards ideologies. You may have great ideas, but once one or two of these white supremacists stand up in front of the media and proclaim they are the alt-right, your movement is fucked. You cannot wrestle it back from them. Start a new movement with a new name and let the racists wallow in their own filth. Let the alt-right name fade into the fringe of society. Publicly and vocally disavow any ties with the racists and avoid them like the Black Plague they are, because if you don't, they will co-opt your movement and it is too late for the alt-right moniker. If watching third-wave feminism trash what was once a good egalitarian movement and transformed the word feminist into a pejorative has taught humanity anything, it is that these kinds of extremists are toxic, cannot be tolerated, and will destroy everything they touch. Via cum diablos, amici me.